Most of us are aware of High School Musical, the series, and Julie and the Phantoms, seeing as they've both curated large fandoms since the shows have been released.
And the golden popcorn goes to Julie and the Phantoms, Edge of Great.
Though besides both of the shows covering music and the promise of a diverse cast, one other thing that they have in common is their treatment of their black girl characters.
Miss Jen asked if I knew Taylor's lines. Wait, what? You approve of this?
Dr. King did not march for this.
Since it came out first, we'll start with High School Musical, the series. Right before the show premiered and was being teased in promos, most people noticed right away how Courtney's characterization was going to play out. Here's one of her first scenes that were released.
If another boy breaks Nene's heart, Hurricane Courtney is gonna make landfall.
Watching the clip, I was prepared for the worst, and once the first episode was released, my suspicions were unfortunately confirmed.
Wait, I gotta show you pictures. Hey. Oh, snap. Pop off, girl.
Stay out of it, Courtney.
You stay out of it. I'm dismantling the patriarchy this year, and I'm not afraid to start with you.
It's also worth noting that while I wasn't aware at the time of the show's release, in an interview Dara Renee revealed that she wasn't actually initially signed onto the show as a main character. She was written as a background character who would be making a guest role. But the showrunners changed their minds after seeing her on set and bumped her to a series regular. I'd also like to point out that in Season 1, the show had absolutely no black writers and there didn't seem to be anyone else black working behind the scenes either. I've seen many instances of the black best friend trope my entire life. It evolved from the problematic mammy stereotype, and from there, Hollywood would sprinkle in a singular black character so they could avoid complaints of the lack of diversity. Yet at the same time, all they were doing was the bare minimum and giving their only black characters zero importance outside of their white or non-black friends. Doing this dehumanized the black characters in the same way the tropes that came from slavery did, and that's just one of the many reasons why it's harmful. How many times do we have to see the black character be the sidekick, and why have we seen more black sidekicks in coming-of-age stories than leads? Especially dark-skinned black girls. Something that's especially disappointing about Courtney's minimal role at the start of the show is that Dara Renee is easily the most talented singer in the cast. She has the perfect voice for musical theater. In real life, she would easily be getting the roles the characters audition for on the show, but instead the show underutilizes her talent and decides to push her into being into makeup and costume design instead. Later in the season we see that she actually can sing, but with her talent it just makes you wonder why she wasn't cast as the lead and why singing wasn't the priority of her character. To further understand how the way Courtney's character was treated in Season 1 was a special case of anti-blackness and not just how writers treat every other side character, here are a few examples of how the non-black side characters were treated. In Season 1, every side character was given a last name except Courtney. We didn't learn that her last name was Green until nearly 2 years after the show's premiere, yet we knew Seb's last name. We also learned parts of Seb's country family background. We saw Big Red's parents. We had an entire love storyline for Big Red, which gave him importance outside of being Ricky's best friend. All Courtney did the entire season was put Nene before herself.
I see why Nene wants this so bad. And if she's not gonna put herself out there, I'll do it for her.
Asked Nene for permission for everything.
You approve of this?
And take a step back for everyone else on the show. It was so bad that when she actually did have an opportunity to be on stage, she was still pushed to the side and had her place taken by a light-skinned mixed girl. The same thing that already happens on a daily basis in Hollywood. It shouldn't have to be said that Sophia Wiley is biracial. We're well aware of that in the way that despite the writers having to change her character's main talent to dancing instead of singing on a musical show, she still managed to get a lead role while Dara had to audition multiple times. Biracial people in Hollywood are already more represented and given more opportunities to be the lead than black women are. This is because of colorism. Gina starts off as being presented as the mean girl, but the difference between her characterization and Courtney's minimal characterization is that the writers were able to give her depth while Courtney was given dust. This is why their characters weren't comparable at the start of the show, and why bringing up Gina, a biracial, isn't a good enough defense to show how black girls were written on the show. With all of that being said, when we got the announcement of season 2, I wanted to be hopeful that the writers of the show would pay attention to the concerns from black viewers of the show. So you can imagine how I felt when we found out that once again Courtney was going to get a role that didn't utilize her full capabilities. Instead, the lead went to Ashlyn, and while Julia Lester is also one of the most talented singers out of the cast, her being cast as Belle is not as revolutionary as the creator of the show presented it to be. If anything, with Halle Bailey being cast as Ariel, Courtney being cast as Belle would have been something more revolutionary in my eyes. At least, a bit more groundbreaking than a black woman playing a motherly figure. All in all, I sincerely hope that we get to see Dara Renee in more projects that properly utilize her talent, and I hope her music career is equally successful. Now on to Julie and the Phantoms. The Netflix family show was revered for having a Puerto Rican lead, which was a step in the right direction. Though unfortunately, the lead being Puerto Rican and her best friend being black, was essentially where the show began and ended when it came to diversity. The show's audition process was said to be an extensive one. Yet still, every single member of the Ghost band was cast as white with the exception of Taylor Kerr, who's half Filipino, who played young Bobby. Though even this is not a great example because the older version of him is played by a fully white man and his role isn't as important as the three main roles. There's only one other man of color on the show, and he similarly has a small role. Willie, portrayed by Boo Boo Stewart, is Alex's love interest. So we don't see him on screen unless Alex is on screen, which is an entirely different video on its own. So now it's time to talk about Flynn. She's the only black character on the show. She's Julie's best friend, which is pretty much all you can say about her character. Oh, and she's also a DJ. Much like Courtney, her character goes to show that white characters aren't the only ones capable of having black best friends be their sidekicks. Yes, it's just as harmful when black girls are the sidekicks to other people of color, because we're still being dehumanized and we're still getting more representation as the sidekick than the lead. Despite being Julie's best friend and knowing her longer than Julie knew the Phantoms, Flynn is only given one song with Julie, and it's a dream sequence. But the show found the time to give the villain 2 songs and one of the white bandmates a solo song. Let's talk about what all of this has to do with the Kent test. The Kent test, created by writer, editor, and culture critic Clarkeisha Kent, is a measure of the representation of femmes of color in media. It asks whether the representation being presented is good and adequate or if it's the opposite. There are 7 questions in the test equal to 8 points. I'll list them all here. If you get all 8 points, you pass the test and the representation is good. If you get 0 points, you've failed just as badly as the representation did. When I applied the test to Courtney and Flynn's characters, I ended up with 0 points. In season 1, neither of them have their own narratives and depend solely on their best friend storylines. They also hold that best friend character down, so while they're not holding down a male, they're still given that same negative role. They're only in the narrative to prop their best friend up. And lastly, Courtney sacrifices her already small and last-minute role in the musical for Gina, a biracial character. Flynn doesn't even have anything to sacrifice because she's denoted to being the band's manager rather than given a chance in the spotlight. Overall, it's clear these writers as well as other people behind the scenes need to do better with the black girls on their show. We're already so underrepresented when it comes to teen media, and it shouldn't have to be this dismissive when we actually are given a chance to be on screen. Anyway, thanks for watching. Looking forward to making more videos soon.